Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. President Trump's latest executive order could put D.C. in the crosshairs. Republican congressional leaders are putting forth a measure that could strip D.C. of home rule. D.C. federal workers are among those walking on eggshells right now, and district residents will be weighing in on the future of RFK Stadium. A lot to talk about tonight on the Daily Drum as we sit down with D.C. Council Chairman Phil Mendelson. Chairman Mendelson, thank you so much for talking to us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me. It's
Sure
good to
thing.
be back.
Let me first talk about this executive order that has been in the works by the Trump administration that is aimed at clearing homeless camps, prosecuting nuisance crimes and gun crimes, even cleaning up graffiti. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, first, let me say I haven't seen the executive order. And earlier, when I spoke with the mayor, she did not believe that the executive order was coming out. Since then, she has indicated that it is, but I have not been briefed on it. If it deals with homeless encampments and National Park Service property, well, that's a federal issue. And whatever one thinks about the pros and cons of clearing these encampments, the president is certainly within his rights to order a federal agency with regard to federal parkland. What does give me a little bit of pause is what is being contemplated with regard to prosecutions in the district. Gives me pause for a couple of reasons. Right now, prosecutions of juveniles are by the DC Attorney General, and the narrative is that he's not prosecuting, and that in fact is not correct. He is prosecuting. So I don't quite know what is the thinking there. The other concern I have with regard to any proposal that deals with criminal justice is that we need this president to send judge nominations to the Senate, and we need the Senate to confirm judges. This has been a problem for years. Whoever's been the president is not sending nominations over to the Senate timely, and the Senate is not acting on them. The result is that our trial courts, the Superior Court, roughly 1 in 4 judgeships is vacant right now. A 25% vacancy rate among the judgeships means that all of the calendars, including criminal prosecutions, are taking longer, are being delayed. So please don't talk to me about improving prosecutions, doing more to fight crime by prosecuting folks and locking them up if you're not going to get us our judges.
What about the nuisance crimes? I mean, certainly these are issues regarding quality of life. Cleaning up graffiti, yay. Nobody likes, certainly nobody really particularly cares for a graffiti unless it's Basquiat.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about nuisance crimes, again, discussions about that from the administration have been very, very vague, whether it's someone urinating on the sidewalk or anything else. Overall, though, are you concerned that there is any overreach as it relates to the district from the Trump administration?
There is the worry that there will be overreach, but to date there has not been. And I don't think it is in our best interest to criticize that which has not happened. Mm-hmm. So I'll go back to what I've sort of said already, and that is the mayor and I, the attorney general, we are going to fight to protect home rule. if a proposal is not actually affecting home rule or changing home rule, then I think we need to be more careful whether in fact the proposal is something we need to object to. You know, these homeless encampments on federal property, that's a federal issue. If the president's talking about homeless encampments on public space, it's the district's property, then that's our business. And actually the mayor's been pretty aggressive with regard to that. Same thing with prosecutions. If Donald Trump wants to tell the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia that he needs to prosecute more cases, the U.S. Attorney has that jurisdiction. So that's a federal decision. But even there are other things that the president should do if the president's going to make an issue of this. And that is, namely, get us judges. We're not able to, we have a local process for sending nominations to the president. The president, by law, has to pick from among the selection given to him. But at that point, it's the president's business, and it's the Senate, United States Senate, and that's not that's outside of our control. That's something that they have to do if they really mean it when they talk about public safety.
Speaking of control, your thoughts about this so-called Bowser Bill or Bowser Act being put forth by Utah Senator Mike Lee and Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles that could roll back home rule and could indeed put DC under congressional control. Yes, understanding that it is difficult to criticize that which has not happened, but certainly this is a thing.
Yes, well, it has happened in the sense that it's been proposed. And I have to say, it's pretty obnoxious to name a anti-home rule bill after the mayor. But putting that aside, on the merits, the bill is very simple. It simply says home rule is repealed, which in my view is not a very serious bill, although we need to be concerned about it. The same bill was introduced last Congress, and it went nowhere. I don't think we can be too calm about it going nowhere. The waters are rough, and I think we need to be on our guard with regard to whether this actually goes somewhere. But let me say this: Congress. This is. I can't be critical enough of Congress. This is a fantasy if they think they're going to run the city better than we are. We're running the city pretty well. Violent crime is the lowest it's been in 30 years. We have AAA ratings from Wall Street. Not every ratings firm. There are a couple that have held us back just a notch. And you know why? They cite specifically Congress, because Congress, the federal government with its debt limit and not being able to pass budgets on time, that actually gives concern to Wall Street, which is why they don't give us a grand slam AAA rating. We are maybe the only jurisdiction in the country that has a fully funded police, fire, teacher pension program and other post-employment benefits, fully funded program. I don't think there's any other jurisdiction like that. We have 52 days worth of operating expenses in our cash reserves. The district is actually running well, and it for sure is running better than when Congress was running it before home rule. Congress can't pass a budget on time. Congress almost shut down our courts last summer because they underfunded the public defender service, and the public defender service was going to have to just shut down several days a week. That's because of mistakes that Congress made, that Congress took a very long time to fix. And they think they can run our city better. There's a longer list, which I can go through if you want, of examples of where they don't have their own act together. I mean, everybody has seen that with the debt limit and the failure to adopt budgets on time. and then they think they can run us better? No. So Senator Lee's bill is a concern because there is this narrative that we're not well run. The bill itself is so thin, one sentence, that it's hard to take it seriously. But really, Congress doesn't even have the capacity to take on the district if it wanted to.
What is Congress's problem with the district? Is it just the Republicans? Is it only because of so many of them, almost all of them, but particularly the Republicans? They work here, don't live here. They have no ties or associations whatsoever to the city beyond the U.S. Capitol campus. What do you believe the problem is?
Well, I hate to say it, but it's Republicans. The Democrats are not attacking us. It is the Republicans. And we see this over and over again. When legislation gets challenged, it's Republicans who are attacking us. It's Democrats who are defending us. It's a partisan issue, and it's unfortunate. I think that Republicans see that for them to hold power or to expand power in the United States, that they want to attack so-called blue cities, and not about the merits, but about the partisanship. And that's very unfortunate. There also is a lack of understanding. There are members of Congress who believe that our budget is actually federal money. It is not. We get, in terms of discretionary dollars, less than 1% of our budget. Back in the 1990s, almost 17% of our budget was a federal payment. Today, not so. We do get formula funds like Medicaid, but every state does. Mm-hmm. And so, Highway Trust Fund, that's another example. Those are all formula funds. But even there, the average state gets about 36% of its budget from federal funds. We get around 25% of our budget from federal funds. Now I'm talking about formula as well as discretionary. But I think members of Congress, there are many members who think that we are just living off the federal trough, that our budget is federal money. In fact, if they were to shut down the district government, they would suddenly have $20 billion more in their coffers. Not true. So there is some ignorance. And then I think there's just as well some callousness, an unwillingness on the part of some members of Congress to understand the district and understand our problems.
Are you concerned at all that the president was talking about federalizing the Metropolitan Police Department? Is that a real concern, or is that bluster?
It is hard to know when things are said, whether they're bluster or their follow through. There has been nothing in the past month that has indicated that the president wants to try to take over the Metropolitan Police Department. The concern comes, I think, really from the fact that he tried to do that in 2020 in the height of the George Floyd protests. And we have not forgotten. And as a result, there's anxiety around it. But every conversation I've had, I have tried to get a sense of whether there are any legs to this, that the president might try it again, and I'm not hearing it. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but to date, that doesn't seem to be in the offing.
Chairman Mendelson, hold on. We are going to take a break. We want to remind our listeners and our viewers, don't forget you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next. That's on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation with DC Council Chairman Phil Mendelson. Mr. Chairman, I want to talk about some of the other issues, obviously, that are facing the city. Um, but this I think is less about facing the city and just about how these issues regarding the Trump administration, um, the optics, for lack of a better term. The mayor has had some criticism from some constituents for not speaking more forcibly around some of the issues that President Trump and some of the members of the GOP have brought forward. Uh, you are somewhat famous for saying, let's not poke the bear. I want to kind of revisit that, and how do you handle the balance of not poking the bear, but still defending the District of Columbia?
Well, I do think it's a balancing act. I mean, there's a lot of concern, a lot of anxiety about what this federal administration could do. And there have been a lot of things that have said by Donald Trump that have been harsh and critical of the district and in ways that were not accurate. But at the same time, so there's a legitimacy to people's anxiety. But if you think about it, we don't really need to be attacking the president for things he hasn't done. We don't need to be attacking him for things that we're afraid he might do, but he hasn't done. And I think we need to focus on the issues and their merits rather than on the personalities or even the partisanship. So you asked me a question in the earlier part of this, and I said, unfortunately, it's partisan, because it is unfortunate. And I think that from the perspective of the district, we should focus on the merits, not on the partisanship. And so if, you asked me if I am upset that the president wants to clean up the federal parkland. No, I'm not. If you ask me if I would be upset if he wants to take over the sanitation in the city, yes, I would be upset. But he hasn't proposed that. So it's finding a balance, finding the right balance. I am not afraid to criticize the federal government, and that would be the current government, which has been in office less than a month, or the former government for their failure to confirm judges, for their failure to adopt budgets on time, for their failure to fix problems with the public defender service, for the failure of the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute more cases more quickly. I want to say I'm happy to criticize. I'm not really happy because these criticisms are serious, but I think that's focusing on the merits, on the unfortunate cold facts of where the federal government is not run well and ought not to try to then insert itself in our local affairs.
Well, and I guess the thing that I'm asking is that it's one thing to focus on what is happening, what has happened, as opposed to, if I may, the mercurial nature of the president's personality.
And hypotheticals.
Yes, exactly. But even as we have seen during the first Trump administration, and I think it's very safe to say that even Republicans have not seen the like, Americans have not seen the like of this kind of president. And so I'm sure it presents some kind of challenge for you and those who are like-minded not to react when he says these things insulting the city that so many people love, meaning the District of Columbia.
Yeah. But there could be times when it might be the better choice to be more circumspect. So, for example, a criticism of how dirty the 3rd Street Tunnel is, I mean, it's a tunnel. And
Right.
I'm not sure that there's any tunnel in the United States that I would want to eat my breakfast off of. But also, I'm not sure how much how important the tunnel is as opposed to getting more affordable housing or prosecuting our crimes, prosecuting crimes that occur here, or improving public education. So I would rather spend my time talking about those things than talking about what somebody said about the tunnel.
Let's talk about another really important issue. The future of RFK Stadium.
Sure.
There's, of course, the hearing that should really share a lot of feedback from residents about what's going to happen at this new stadium is really important. And you have been over the past several years, you've been pretty careful about what you've said about it. If I remember correctly, you did express some concerns years ago about the surrounding communities, the residents, how they may be impacted by the possibility of a new stadium and those kinds of things. What do you want to see come out of this RFK Stadium situation? Do you want to see what do you want to see?
Well, what I would like to see is a comprehensive plan for development of the campus. That would include, of course, some recreational facilities as well as housing and affordable housing, some retail that would serve the immediate community. And I expect that, let's just be real. I expect that there will be a push for a football stadium there. I'm not opposed to a stadium. It's not my goal in life, but I'm not opposed to a stadium. I do know that there are residents nearby who do not want to see a stadium there. Where I have an issue is the public financing of a stadium. And I've said that it is not a good investment on the part of the district to put public dollars into a football stadium. The research has shown over and over and over again that football stadiums are not money makers for the jurisdiction, the city, the county, whatever. And if you think about it, because that research applies as well to other stadiums like baseball stadiums, a football stadium has only 9 or 10 games a year, maybe a couple of preseason games. That's a lot fewer than baseball, which has 80 home games. If somebody says, well, we could have concerts there, well, the city owns Nationals Park. And there are a few concerts that would not go to Nationals Park because they're so big, but any other concerts would be basically competing against our own facility, the Nationals Park. So that's not a good investment. I think that if the NFL or the Commanders want a stadium, I'm fine with supporting that, but they can finance themselves. If they finance it by having the development rights within a plan that the city approves, I'm okay with that too. And if that's a way to get a stadium that is self-financed by the project, I'm okay with that. But we have too many demands on our budget to be adding a couple $100 million for so-called infrastructure, whatever that means.
Even at the risk of competing with Northern Virginia, I mean, would you be willing to sacrifice not getting a stadium and letting it go to Virginia?
Yes, for several reasons. One, I think the reason why the Commanders in the NFL were working hard for Congress to approve the transfer of the land was because they really want to be in the district.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, because what I hear from folks all over the place, including folks in Virginia, is that they would like to see the stadium where it used to be. And third, because I think the responsible approach to this is to look at the rate of return for the district. And the rate of return is not profit making from building a football stadium in an area of the city where there is not a lot of existing economic activity. Think Nationals, and Nationals is surrounded by commercial activity that's already there. Not true with RFK. It's surrounded by a river, parkland, and a residential community, Kingman Park. It's just not a good investment of our dollars. Yes, there's a lot of civic pride in our football team. Great. But that's not in itself generating taxes that enable us then to pay for programs.
And just from an outsider's observation, I am old enough to remember, indeed, when the Washington Senators were here. Barely old enough to remember that.
Yeah, I'm like a baby, like maybe 2 years old.
Yeah, well, my grandfather caught a foul ball, and I do remember that. But all jokes aside, but also I do remember the traffic tie-ups when the football team was playing during the 1970s. Well, the city has grown. The infrastructure around what is there now, the old RFK Stadium, really hasn't changed much in 20 or 30 years. And I can't imagine what that traffic would look like now compared to when the team was playing there before, and what kind of infrastructure would need to be put in place to handle the kind of traffic impact on that same area.
Well, yes, and infrastructure is an undefined term, and yet that's what I have heard some folks argue is, oh, we'll let the Commanders pay for the stadium, the vertical costs, we'll just pay for the infrastructure. Undefined term. Cost us close to $200 million for the soccer stadium, which is 20,000 seats. What a fraction of what a football stadium would be. What I would like to see is a master development, and the city would come up with the broad contours of what that project looks like. So many housing units, so much retail, a stadium, and then let the Commanders be the master developer and put it all together. And they pay for it all, just like the Wharf. The Wharf was a master development. The city came up with the broad contours of what we wanted, and P.N. Hoffman and Associates with partners actually developed it and paid for the whole thing. So that would be an approach, and I think that would reduce the risk to the district of cost overruns, but also, as I said before, we don't have the money to be adding to our already too long list a new capital project. And I mean, like hundreds of millions of dollars. Infrastructure, it was close to $200 million, the infrastructure for the soccer stadium. So it would be much more for a football stadium. We just don't have that money.
I want to ask you about the removal of former Ward 8 council member Trayon White. First and foremost, how do you know, and how can Ward 8 residents know that their issues are being served while that seat sits empty?
Well, first, very unfortunate that we got to a point where the council unanimously voted to expel Mr. White. Of course, very unfortunate the circumstances that he found himself in, that he caused. There are 5 members of the council who are elected citywide. I'm one of them. And every one of us represents Ward 8 as well as the rest of the city. So residents of Ward 8 have 5 of us whom they can call for help, for services. I have a constituent service folks on my staff, and we do help with Ward 8. But second, I have kept on staff the constituent service folks who were in Councilmember Tran White's office. So folks in Ward 8 who are used to calling the Ward 8 constituent service phone number can still call the Ward 8 constituent service number for help.
So, and when that happens, once they get these messages, these concerns from residents of Ward 8, what do they do with them? I mean, is it like a deck of cards where they just say, well, Chairman Mendelson, here are 3 issues over here, and then they go to some of the other ones? I mean, how is that work distributed, or those concerns distributed?
Well, most of the constituent service requests that we get relate to either city services or assistance with utility and rent payments. Mm-hmm. And so we will get those requests and then we will try to help. Let me be clear. If somebody's looking to any council office for help with rent or utilities, the amount that we're able to help is in the double digits, maybe $100 or $200. Mm-hmm. So I'm just making it clear to folks, don't start getting on the phone and expecting that you're going to get your $3,000 rent bill paid. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, we are able to help or try to help with finding resources that can pay some of that rent or utilities. A lot of calls have to do with city services. If somebody is concerned about an issue, like let's say that the rec center needs to, the Bald Eagle Rec Center needs to change its hours. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something that can be brought to my attention or any of the at-large members. We have a committee that deals with recreation, and so the residents could call that committee as well.
As you know,
I believe that's the Committee on Facilities, which is chaired by Councilmember Janice Lewis-George, oversees Department of Recreation. So those avenues are there for residents to reach out.
If Councilmember White decides to run in the special election and he wins, what will the council do if he's reelected?
Well, I have assiduously avoided dealing with a hypothetical like that. There are too many factors around how that might occur, and it's just not worth trying to play out the different scenarios in terms of what would happen. Let's see how this all plays out.
Very well.
But I will say that the council, members were not pleased from day one that every one of us was put in a position where the integrity of the legislative branch was in question by citizens of the district. That's just not where we can be. We need the public trust.
I want to talk a little bit about the ban on cell phones in schools.
Sure.
And how you believe this will help reduce, the kind of violence that we've seen in and around schools. As you know, in some rural parts of the country, cell phones have kind of been a lifeline when there have been school shootings and barricade situations. Your thoughts about that?
Sure. So the issue, which is kids having cell phones in the classroom, is I don't view that as much as a public safety issue as an education issue.
Education.
Kids who are distracted in class because they have their cell phones are not learning. And I believe that there are many schools or teachers who would like to get rid of these cell phones from the classroom, but in many instances, they feel that that could be very controversial with the kids, of course, and the parents. And so passing a law or having a statewide policy, I'm thinking of Virginia, actually makes it easier for the schools to enforce what they think is common sense. So that would be a reason to go forward with it. I do think it makes sense to leave some autonomy up to the schools as to how they would go about implementing this. But let me see, I see some pros and cons. Personally, I see more pros to banning cell phones than I see cons. But we're going to have a hearing. The hearing's going to be the end of March, something like March 25th or 26th. And at that hearing, we will hear the arguments pro and con and decide from there where we are going to go with the bill.
One thing I did neglect to mention earlier, and I think this is a critical issue about the Trump administration telling federal workers to come back to work. That is something that the mayor has been talking about for quite some time, but that also is happening in the midst of this apparent purge of federal government workers. What your thoughts about this kind of hodgepodge of events?
Well, personally, I'm not happy with all this turmoil that's going on with the federal workforce. I think it's very unfortunate, and I think that there are ways to effect a change that is less disruptive and also is less damaging personally or individually to individual workers. How it will affect the district, it's unclear. So the numbers I heard were something like 75,000 federal workers decided to take the buyout. Assuming that buyout actually occurs, that's 75,000 out of a total workforce, which is in the millions and millions, and they're not all DC residents.
Exactly.
I don't know what number are DC residents, but it's a significantly smaller number. No, we don't want to see any DC residents made unemployed. We do have, and I pressed this with our chief financial officer recently, an unemployment trust fund that will pay unemployment insurance if they were working in the district. And there is not a concern that that there aren't enough funds in the trust fund. So we will be able to take care of those workers.
For how long?
Well, the duration that the law allows for unemployment insurance. That's just not an issue. I mean, I could say a little bit more. The trust fund is at this point nearly the same level it was before the pandemic. And when the pandemic struck, we had unemployment of over 100,000. And the fund was able to pay all those claims, although it did get dangerously low. There's no expectation that there will be that number of unemployed should the worst that's been suggested actually materialize.
How does snow removal? What grade would you give the district on snow removal this time?
Well, I'm going to give them an A, but I'll also note that the weather helps since it got warm right after the snowfall. But I live on a residential street, not an arterial, and it was plowed, and it wasn't plowed just because I live on it. The streets around me were plowed. I would, and when I got to the arterial yesterday morning, it was clear as well. So I would give them an A on this one.
Do you have any final thoughts about what's ahead for the council, or any other hot button issues you'd like to share with us in these last handful of minutes?
Sure. Well, we are getting ready to receive the mayor's proposed budget for fiscal year 26. The fiscal year starts October 1st. We'll get the proposed budget from her April 2nd, I believe. We will have 56 days by law. Under the Home Rule Act, we have 56 days before the first vote, 70 days total. And we have to vote twice on the budget. I expect the budget is going to be tight. I'm hopeful that the mayor and her proposal will make better choices than she did last year when she cut a lot of social justice programs. We were able to restore most of those cuts. And we were able to do that without having to raise a lot in terms of taxes. I am concerned that expenditures have been growing faster than our revenues have been growing. And although we are balanced and we have adequate reserves, I mean more than adequate reserves, that's not a good trend if it continues. And so I would like to see more discipline, both from the mayor as well as my colleagues, with regard to being more careful about spending. I think we could be more effective with some of our programs if we were better about how we're spending on those programs. I'm trying to think of some other issues. The council continues to be looking at public safety and what more we can do. Violent crime last year was at a 30-year low in the district. I noticed at today's statistics that homicides are higher than at this time last year. It's not a hugely different number, but I just assumed to see the homicides continue to drop. Other violent crime is down. It's down, I think, about 30%. And last year it was down significantly. So public safety, public education remains top on my list because I think that if we can close the achievement gap between low-income Black students and affluent, typically white students, improve the achievement of all students, that it will have a lasting positive ripple effect in terms of so many social justice issues. Plus, public education is a promise of opportunity for our kids. And when kids don't learn, then we're failing in that, delivering on that opportunity. So that remains top on my list. And we're going to be looking at how we, the council, the legislative branch, can be better at pushing the executive branch to improve academic achievement. Housing is going to continue to be a concern. There just is not enough housing. This is true not just in DC, but in every city across the country, and it has to do with the decades of disinvestment by the federal government in housing. Still, we need to be doing more to ensure that there's more housing, both market rate and affordable. Why do I say market rate? Because there is a supply-demand issue. If there isn't enough market rate, then people who can afford it will go into neighborhoods where there's lower priced housing and buy it up, driving up prices and, of course, driving out residents. So we just need more housing. And so that remains a priority as well.
I'm going to have to end this conversation right here, but I appreciate your time, DC Council Chairman Phil Mendelson. Thank you so much, sir. We will be in touch.
Yes, thank you, Harold. Thank you for having me back. It's good to see you.
You too, sir. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, February 13th.